Bethesda Softworks' rise to power began not during their beginning period of creating such masterpieces as Wayne Gretzky Hockey and Home Alone, but when they began to work on their most prolific series, The Elder Scrolls. This legacy began with Arena, a heavily Ultima-inspired RPG, surprisingly with no type of arena whatsoever anywhere in the game. It did, however, construct a base for what would later spiral into a series of groundbreaking, innovative, and magical worlds. The Elder Scrolls series would then later expand into the many successful sequels we know today, as well as a few embarrassing, less groundbreaking ones that most fans would just rather forget about. Personally, for me, the Elder Scrolls series holds a very special place in my heart, as The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion was the first game of its kind that I actually enjoyed. Well, enjoyed is an understatement. It completely blew my young mind away. I simply had never experienced anything quite like it before, being able to explore the entirety of this fully realized world, talk to all of the, intriguing characters.
Powder deer penis.
I was so blown away, in fact, that I'm pretty sure that I spent a good amount of my first time in the game just talking to NPCs, killing people, stealing everything, and just traveling to the edge of the world to see what I could find. Keeping in mind that while Oblivion hosted a quite expansive and large world, it was not exactly filled to the brim with unique and exciting content. Most of what I found was copy and pasted caves, alien ruins, both filled with their respective copy and pasted imps and bandits. But I've always found that the real heart of the Elder Scrolls games lie in their quests. No, not the main quests, although I am of the opinion that Oblivion's climax was pretty badass. But no, the side quests are where it's at. As is the same with the Fallout series, which I indeed will be discussing later, you'll find most of your enjoyment by looking for quests, talking to quest givers, going on quests, turning in quests, and using your earnings from all that questing to help you complete more quests more efficiently. And the Elder Scrolls games have no lack of interesting side quests. Whether it be Morrowind with its factions all waiting for you to become the leader of, Oblivion with its insane day-trip quest lines where you'll find yourself crashing dinner parties or being rained on by flaming dogs, or Skyrim with its people sending you to retrieve some ancient family heirloom from a Draugr-infested crypt, and, actually, that's all I can remember from that one. Yeah, you can definitely expect me to talk about that a bit later. There are plenty of reasons to like the Elder Scrolls games besides the side quests, but those reasons seem to be diminishing with each new sequel. Each year, Bethesda takes a step forward with the franchise and quite a few steps back. I'm not going to dance around the issue here. The Elder Scrolls and Fallout series are evolving with each new game. Sometimes there are changes that make sense, like Morrowind keeping skills such as alchemy and athletics, while getting rid of a lot of the more bizarre ones present in previous iterations, like climbing and Minotaur, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. But then we have the ones that are just plain and simple dumbing down. First we had Oblivion's Magic Compass, which is kind of understandable since you wouldn't think that the majority of players would want to spend hours trying to follow step-by-step instructions, trying to find out where they're going, like in Morrowind. But then there's the more nonsensical ones, like Fallout 4's complete removal of skills. Seriously, who thought it was a good idea to make the only reward for gaining experience to be perks? Perks used to be fun little bonuses you got when you leveled up, that mostly granted you cool abilities, gave you access to unique dialogue options, and oftentimes were just a fun novelty. Now that skills are gone, the progression feels very off, as does gaining experience. The reward is lessened, though it is a bit balanced out with the new crafting and settlement systems. With every new game including less and less RPG elements, it's becoming harder and harder to call those games RPGs. In fact, Fallout 4 seems to have more in common with the ever-popular open-world action game with some kind of progression system genre, including titles such as, but not limited to, Far Cry, Watch Dogs, Sleeping Dogs, Grand Theft Auto, Assassin's Creed, Saints Row, Metal Gear Solid 5, and plenty of others. Fallout 4 still has some of those RPG elements in there, but it's so far removed from its roots that it makes me worry about the next Elder Scrolls installment. So, what is the best case scenario for the next Elder Scrolls game? Well, I have gone through each game and kept track of all the things that were super cool and all of the things that were not super cool. And for the sake of research, I will be starting with the Elder Scrolls Arena. After a bit of screwing around with DOSBox, confusion, pulling out of my hair, and a bit of luck, I was finally able to start playing the game. Following a brief exposition dump, the game had me build my character. After answering some questions, allocating attribute points, and choosing my appearance, name, and homeland, I eventually ended up with a Black Jesus-looking dude named Fargoth. The game dubbed me a barbarian, which worries me a bit, seeing as I decided to answer the game's questions as I would myself. As is tradition, you start off in a prison, playing a man or woman with a completely blank slate in a world waiting to be explored. Although you may run into a few problems that might get in the way of your ability to explore this world. Only after messing around with some emulator junk and following some directions in the README file was I finally able to discover just how archaic this game's control scheme is. It's controlled almost entirely using mouse movements, and will have you dragging along the edges of the screen to navigate. These controls are hard to get used to, but after a while I was finally able to figure everything out. The Elder Scrolls Arena attempts to provide the experience of a Baldur's Gate-style isometric dungeon-crawling RPG, but from a first-person view. This change of perspective was not a smooth one. It still attempts to recreate the dice roll hit-and-miss combat from those games, but it makes no sense here. You can be at point-blank range, but most of your attacks are just going to phase through the enemy right in front of you. You can loot and equip armor and weapons you find around, but sometimes equipping one item for some reason changes all of your other stats, and I could never really figure out why. It also never made sense why the buckler I found was better than the tower shield. Now it's time to move on to the next game, Daggerfall. You go through a very similar character creation, homeland, skills, face, name, all that stuff, and then another exposition dump like an arena. Except this time around, the exposition dump is an FMV cutscene. My recording software stopped working during this cutscene, so you'll just have to take my word for it. After that, we finally get into the game. So far, this is the only Elder Scrolls game where you don't start out as a prisoner. In this one, you're given a text box that explains how you crashed your boat and got trapped inside of a cave, and there's also some kind of main quest involving you destroying a letter sent by that guy in the FMV cutscene, but who cares? You know, seeing as how I've actually played Daggerfall before, I was expecting to talk about how it's just more of Arena with some small improvements, but good God, did I change my mind quick? And by quick, I mean before I even started playing. This game has actual tutorials that actually explain how to play. The interface has undergone some drastic improvements too. Hell, you're even allowed to reassign controls, and shockingly, there's a mouse look mode. It takes some tweaking, but you can actually get this game to control pretty similarly to the more current Elder Scrolls games. This is going to sound a bit weird, but stepping outside for the first time in this game came as a bit of a shock to me. When I exited the cave, saw the endless stretch of land before me, and that actually kind of okay music started playing. The realization hit me. This is an Elder Scrolls game. I mean, well, obviously, but what I mean to say is that I was actually kind of shocked at just how much this 1996 DOS game shares with its successors. Daggerfall is big, and I mean big, half the size of Great Britain big. You can freely travel anywhere in this huge world, but unless you want to spend a few hours or days, depending on where you're headed, you're gonna want to use the fast travel. I went where the tutorial recommended I go to get started out, the city of Daggerfall. I actually found a quest almost the moment I stepped into the city by talking to this Jim Carrey looking guy. He tells me that he thinks his friend would like me and advises me to seek him out at the Adjective Animal Inn. And this is where I ran into my first problem. Finding out where the hell to go. Some NPCs gave me vague directions to the old goat when I asked them, but since all the buildings look the same and the only way to find their names is to enter them, exit them, and then check your map, it takes a while. Eventually did find the building I was looking for, but in the process of searching for the guy I was looking for, I got sidetracked and ended up snooping around in a box. You never hear your character speak in this game, but I'm assuming that when I opened the box, he yelled, "I'm looking inside of a box!" at the top of his lungs because when I exited out of the looting menu, I was immediately met with a distant repeated "halt" of pissed off guards. Long story short, I was banished from Daggerfall forever as a punishment for looking inside of a box. By the way, I really was not expecting this to become a horror game. After I got kicked out of the town, the sky turned blood red and I had nowhere to run as dozens of villagers began to silently march towards me. Mike the Honest did not go down without a fight though. He managed to take down a few villagers with him before he was tragically cut down by the corrupt guards.